I am starting to play with VS Code, Visual Studio Code, and getting my Ruby and Rails configuration just how I like it. And one thing that I came across was that the debugging story has gotten very, 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 very good in Ruby 3.1, where up until this point, it actually lagged behind most other languages. Of course, being super dynamic interpreted language, you would expect that to a certain extent. But Koichi Sasada in particular has really put in a lot of work to modernize the Ruby built-in debugging facilities, as well as a gem called Debug that will allow us to actually use the native VS Code debugger to debug our stuff. And I just discovered this yesterday, and I realize a lot of people probably don't know this yet. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of like the Rails using Ruby on Rails 7, a little bit about like why debugging has gotten trickier, even though it's gotten more advanced for Rails 7, as well as how to wire everything up to VS Code so you can use like a nice vanilla out-of-the-box Rails 7 installation, and also take advantage of the new fancy debugging facilities that are much more native feeling in something like VS Code, and surely other kind of like more batteries included editors like RubyMine. All right, so we're going to start with just making a new application, I suppose. So let's go into a code directory, and I'm going to make a new well, first of all, let's check our versions, right? Because time keeps moving. Good. I'm not great at typing. Okay, so we're in Ruby 3.1.2, Rails 7.0.3.1. We're going to make a Rails new app. We're going to call it Rebug. And this time we're going to use ESBuild as opposed to Webpacker, or as opposed to sprockets for JavaScript concatenation. And we're also going to set it up to say, hey, we want to use Tailwind for CSS. We're not going to actually write any Tailwind today, but I want to create an environment. And then, and PropShaft as opposed to Sprockets. So PropShaft is a more modern, more lithe, simple asset pipeline, asset manager to like do the stuff with the application.css and application.js without necessarily like considering the all the stuff Sprockets had to do with like stuff like actively transpiling CoffeeScript and Sass. So it's just a simpler one. When we do a new application this way, it's actually going to by default create a procfile.dev file. And when it creates that procfile.dev, that is like going to be actually invoked whenever we say bin/dev. So you might be familiar with, over the last many years, running your Rails app in one terminal window and then your Webpacker in another one. Because it's kind of gotten out of hand, you can see the procfile.dev, pop into Rebug. You can take a look at it. So here we have now a web process, a JavaScript process, and a CSS process, because we're using JS bundling, CSS bundling, and then of course you have to run your Rails server. And so that's just like keeping 3 terminals open is too much. And you can, of course, you can still go and run Rails-S, and you can run yarn build and so forth. But you can also run this new bin dev that's built in for you as a bin stub, and so it'll just all it does is make sure that Foreman's installed, and then it'll start Foreman. Nothing fancy. So if we run bin dev like that, you'll get some color coding, and it'll run all 3 of these things at once. All right. So that's our application. I suppose if I just run it now, and let's say open up neat. All right. So I got a Rails thing. I'm running my Rails, and now I'm going to start writing some code. And like I said, I'm getting into VS Code, so we're going to open up VS Code here. All right, so I'm in VS Code. Everything is new again. Nothing's committed. So we're just going to ignore the commit status for everything today. And we're going to make just a couple adjustments. We're going to start writing some code here. So I'm going to get rid of the default Rails stuff, and I'm going to say we're going to cover resources called things, and the root of our application is going to be things index, which is going to necessitate a things controller, which we can take a look over here. We can say, hey, all right, so things controller.rb, boom. And then I'm still getting used to the Vim emulation inside of this thing. It's pretty good, fine. I don't love it, but all the other kind of perks are enough to keep me interested. All right, C. Okay, so that's now I've got a things controller. Things index is my root, and I just want to render some JSON. So let's say like now, and actually let's make a variable so we have something to debug. So now equals time.zone.new. Or time.zone.now. I always forget. Yeah, time.zone.now. Okay, so then we're going to render some JSON now. Got it. And the standard, of course, is going to remind me to remove the white space. All right, so if I look at localhost 3000, now I get my, you can see it up in the corner, the JSON. All right, neat. So let's say that I am in the, I want to do a debugger. Now, you might be familiar with pry or bybug. In Rails 7, they changed the default. Maybe this is starting with 3.1. It would make sense if it was. They changed the default to actually debug here. So you can see there's a whole guide on the changes to debugging. Here's the debug gem and which platforms it supports. And so we're going to have a different set of commands now. You can still use, I think, binding.irb and other stuff. But we're going to just say debugger here to put in a debug point. And then we're going to take a look at our terminal. Now, if I refresh the page at this point, I do indeed catch the debugger. You can see the debugger here. You can see the nice, like, where am I? But like Foreman and Foreman-like stuff, like I imagine Hivemind, Overmind, and similar, like, process splitting, aggregating tools for running multiple processes in one shell, is not designed for like capturing standard in particularly gracefully. So if I want to type like, okay, so now, oh, well, that doesn't do what I want really. And if I say C and I run, will it actually continue? Like, maybe not. Continue command completed. Okay, cool. And so it's just like not a particularly graceful way to be like, all right, so ls now. And it's just like it didn't actually, it's like list command. It's clearly not picking up all of my keystrokes in order, which is to be expected. I mean, that's not, this is not like the most delightful debugging experience. So of course, like what I could do if I killed everything, okay, cool. So what I could do, of course, is I could just like go back to the good old days of running bin rails s, and I could, let's say load this page again. Now I get my debugger, and I can, if you used pry, there's a new outline command that'll give you all of the methods, just like pry's ls command, which is really like my favorite reason for using pry is to figure out, like what are the methods on this thing, and ls is indeed an alias of outline for people used to that. But just like rdbg allows you to do like, breakpoint debugger commands like continue and C, even Q for quit. You even get these little things like step over or step. I don't know if step in or step over is the default for step. So that's like neat. You can do all that stuff. You can look at variables. You can, of course, like ask questions like now.day. That's just like the traditional debugging facility. But of course, we lose the proc file running everything for us, and we'd be going back to 3. So like what I want to avoid, right, whenever I'm programming is I want to get fast feedback, and I want to have a quick way to hook into a particular thing without necessarily going over to another terminal and like killing all my servers and then starting all over again and then trying to get everything into the same state. So what I want instead is to make it really easy just to attach and detach a debugger from whatever my process is, and I want to run the process in the most convenient way possible, so here we go. So we're going to exit. All right, we quit our server, we're not going to run things that way anymore, and instead, what we can do is we can think about this new tool called rdbg, which comes along with the debug gem, which Kocihi has written, which was sort of inheriting the old libdebug from Ruby. And we can actually say, let's see, rdbg, you can just give it tac C, and then you can give it a command. And what it'll do is it'll actually launch whatever your command is, but first pause and attach the debugger to it. And we can just say continue here, and it's just running our service. We can refresh the page, we catch the thing. This is not that dissimilar, of course, from just like writing debugger in there. But what's interesting is like if you learn this command a bit, you can see how you can start to build up what you might be interested in. So we can say like tac n, for example, and it'll run nonstop. it'll just run for us. It won't do that initial pause. Great. Okay, quit. Okay. And then you can also tell it to open a particular front end for the debugger. And now by default, that front end is rdbg. That's like what we've been doing. Now instead, what we're going to do is we're going to actually like launch this with VS Code, which is going to take a couple steps because by default, it's not going to just magically work. Because we don't have any sort of like awareness of the Ruby debugger in VS Code. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the extensions world. We're going to say search for vscode-rdbg. Hope that we find it. There we go. So Kocihi also wrote this vscode-rdbg Ruby debugger. We're going to install it here. Refresh. And because I don't trust VS Code just yet, even though it's all JavaScript and cool, I am going to quit out entirely. Quit that too. And I'm going to run this again. It's going to attach VS Code. Here I can see I'm attached now to a VS Code debugger. And if I refresh the page, I'm here. I'm in the debugger. Now I'm in an arbitrary window though. I'm not in like my application window right now. But I can see like, okay, cool. I've got like a step debugger, these commands up here. I can like step over a line and so forth. I also have this debug console in addition to my terminal. So if I could run the terminal here, but you can see I'm like in this variable like folders like this tempter. So it's not quite perfect, but I can get in like this. Now, if I wanted to fold this into my application, what I could do instead is I could actually wire this in as a launch configuration to attach manually to a running process. So let's try doing that. It's a little bit finicky. I haven't figured out the exact order of what to do with this stuff, but we're going to quit out again. I'm going to go here. We've exited that. I'm going to run code period to open up Visual Studio Code to a particular place. I've got this extension now down here, the VS Code debugger. I'm going to now make a launch config. I'm going to do this. Now, you can see it's got two different launch configs by default, the debugger, the current file with rdbg. I'm not going to use that one today. That's actually more self-explanatory. But I do want to be able to attach with rdbg. And so you can see this right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just from the terminal window here, sticking in the terminal, I'm going to run that same command that we just had over in my terminal. I'm starting to like get more and more stuff into VS Code in the interest of living the sweet IDE life. Okay, so I'm going to run that here. Now I'm running, and I can run attach with rdbg. Okay, now I refresh the page. And I am inside now my actual project. So if I'm looking at the Explorer view, it's synced up with where I am in my source code. And I'm right at that debugger, and I can still type into my debugger console. So that's pretty slick. I can hit play and I can continue. In fact, I can remove the debugger now that I'm like sort of attached to a session, or I know how to attach to a session. I can actually create a breakpoint here by making a little red dot here in the gutter. And now when I visit the page, it should have caught that. It didn't catch that. Okay, so why isn't the debugger going? Did I no, I got a breakpoint. What did I do wrong? Well, restart. Oh, that probably was the wrong thing to do. Did it quit? No. Cannot find attachable Ruby project. Okay. So I'm going to try that one more time. That's surprising. It's worked every time until I do it on video, naturally. Ah, shoot. Oh yeah, I didn't actually attach that time. Okay, so I'm attached now. Got my debugger. I refresh. Cool, and I'm here. And if I refresh again, it should reattach. Okay, so it works usually. Don't feel bad if things don't work the first time for you. The biggest, most fun part of being a programmer is the banging your head up against a wall and then getting different results each time you try something. All right, so now I can debug whenever, and it just, I create little breakpoints. I can enable, disable the breakpoints. This tiny little view down here, itty bitty guy, I can, I'll see the breakpoint there, and I can enable, disable it from a central place. Of course, like if you're familiar with step debuggers, all of the step commands are up here, and you can also kind of expand here and look in at whatever your state is. There's nothing interesting here because I'm just like on a top level controller and I don't have any of my own code. But if you're in like a class and you had like, state, or you had other things going on, or you had a big call stack, you'd have interesting stuff to look at. And of course, the call stack here is split up because Puma by default has a gajillion servers. Okay, so we've made a lot of progress. We've got a new Rails application. It's using this new debug gem. We've got the debug gem looking at VS Code. And we're almost where we want to be, except we're still just running bin Rails s to get a debugger, which is not quite where we want to be. We want to be running that new bin dev command, which is going to run Foreman. So that's going to require us to go and take a look at procfile.dev. And here we can actually just put exactly what we had from our terminal using rdbg, tac n, tac open VS Code, and then leave that remaining tac in a space so that the command that runs is this right here. Now this is like a generated file, but it lives in the root of the project, and so we can safely edit it and just know that if like we do rerun a Rails generator, we might have to like, deal with this in version history, but like this is ours. We can do this if we want. Now it says VS Code here. I can show you a trick later to like extract that away into an environment variable, because maybe not everyone on your project uses VS Code and still wants to run bin dev. But let's go ahead and try running bin dev here in our terminal. So now we're starting 3 different processes up. Now, with this debugger, like I just accidentally showed you, if you refresh the page, it won't catch by default because we've not attached a debugger to it. But with this breakpoint, we can, launch, and there's a launch control, I think is the name of the extension here, launch configs. This little relatively unknown extension will allow you to make keyboard shortcuts for launch configs. And so I would probably just bind this to something like Command Shift Alt R or D or something. But anyway, I'm going to run this now. When I run it, it's going to be running, and I refresh, and now I've caught my debugger. And you can see I've done that without goofing up all of the output in the main Foreman. In fact, I hit play, and you can see the debugger got connected, but then it just finished the request. Standard in, standard out didn't get all goofy and wonky in the process. So that was pretty cool. We got through a lot. The little trick that I use for avoiding having like any editor-specific stuff in my proc file is you can use an environment variable instead. You can do like an expression here, because this is ultimately just going to be processed by your shell. You can say rdbg. This is a custom variable that you can own, that you can create, and then you can set a default for it. So maybe you just make it rdbg by default, which of course, as we've shown, is not particularly user-friendly when you're running via Foreman, but it's the most obvious thing. And so now when we run it, I've actually already set that variable in my profile as a user. So if I echo this out, you can see it says VS Code, and now I can run bin dev. When I run bin dev, and this is a second verse, same as this is the first kind of thing, I'll attach with rdbg. I'll get used to that eventually. I'll refresh this page, and then you can see I'm caught again. So that way I can, when time comes to commit all this to Git, I don't have to have VS Code, the word VS Code, or any one particular tool anywhere in my Git repository. It can all be agnostic. And yeah, so like this is pretty darn slick in my opinion. Like it gets you that kind of like neat introspective IDE feel without any of the gross like lock-in and proprietariness. Or slowness. It's actually like really fast. So kudos to Kocihi and the rest of the Ruby core and Ruby committers team. Ruby 3.1 is just like Ruby 3.0 before it. It keeps coming with like more and more quality of life stuff. And so if you haven't upgraded to 3.0 or to 3.1, when you do, I strongly encourage you to check out a lot of the talks from the last couple of years of Ruby Kocihi, Ruby Kocihi Takeout. They've done lots of great videos in English about all of the improvements that they've made to the IRB, to the read line input-output stuff, like to make the interactive shell really useful. And now this RDBG stuff supporting any arbitrary debugger front end is just really slick. So thanks again to our friends on the Ruby core team and the other Ruby committers who've made this just so great. So I'm really excited to start developing Rails this way and having like a nicer debugger story than I've had before, because it's ultimately just means faster feedback and getting answers to the questions that I have for my computer faster. So check it out, and I hope you have a great time. Thanks for watching.